The vast Valeri Empire was known for its towering cities, shimmering with golden light, and its rulers, the royal twin sisters, Serenia and Valera. Among its many laws and traditions, one thing remained clear: humans were considered an inferior species. Yet, against all odds, a human had been chosen as the personal bodyguard of the princesses. His name was Adrian Locke. Adrian had seen many strange things in his life, but standing in the grand palace of an alien empire, surrounded by creatures that looked at him with disgust, was something else. The court was filled with tall, elegant Valeri nobles with silver-hued skin and glowing blue eyes. Their expressions carried a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Why has a human been assigned to protect our princesses?" a noble sneered. Adrian stood still, his face expressionless. He had served as a soldier for years, fought in countless battles, and survived against impossible odds. He wasn't about to be intimidated by a room full of judgmental aliens. An elder Valeri, dressed in golden robes, spoke. "Enough. The emperor has made his decision. This human has proven himself capable." The murmurs in the court continued, but no one dared to challenge the emperor's command. A moment later, the doors at the far end of the hall opened. The air itself seemed to change as two figures stepped forward. The twin princesses. Serenia, the older twin, walked gracefully. She had a calm, collected expression, her golden crown resting gently on her silver hair. Her eyes examined Adrian with quiet curiosity. Beside her, Valera was different. Her movements were sharp, filled with energy and defiance. She crossed her arms, her lips curled into a frown. "This is the human," Valera scoffed. "He doesn't look very impressive." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "And you don't look very grateful." A few gasps echoed through the court. A human speaking so boldly. It was unheard of. Valera's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. "You dare?" Serenia placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, stopping her. She looked at Adrian with a measured gaze. "You must understand, human. No Valeri ruler has ever trusted a human this much before. You will have to prove yourself." Adrian smirked slightly. "That's what I do best." The moment was tense, but Serenia nodded. "Then let's see if you are worthy." As Adrian followed them out of the court, he could feel the burning stares of nobles behind him. He was not welcome here. But he had a job to do. And nothing, not aliens, not politics, not even two royal sisters, was going to stop him. Adrian walked behind the twin princesses, his eyes scanning every corner of the palace halls. The walls shimmered with golden carvings, and glowing orbs floated in the air, lighting the pathways. Everything about the Valeri Empire felt advanced, yet ancient at the same time. The sisters led him into a private chamber. The moment the doors closed, Valera turned sharply to face him, her silver eyes burning with irritation. "I don't trust you," she said bluntly. Adrian crossed his arms. "That makes two of us." Valera's expression darkened, but before she could say anything, Serenia sighed. "Enough, Valera. Father chose him for a reason. That doesn't mean he's not a risk." Valera shot back. "A human protecting us? This is ridiculous. What if he betrays us?" Adrian sighed. He had dealt with difficult people before, but this was something else. "If I wanted to betray you," he said, "I wouldn't have walked in here without a weapon." Valera scoffed. "As if a human could even harm us." Adrian smirked. "You sound nervous." Valera's jaw tightened, but Serenia placed a gentle hand on her sister's arm. "He's here now, Valera. We should at least give him a chance." Valera hesitated but finally looked away. "Fine," she muttered. "But if he fails, I will be the first to say, 'I told you so.'" Serenia turned to Adrian. "Come, we have much to discuss." They moved to a large circular table, a holographic map of the empire glowing in its center. Serenia pointed at a distant moon near the border of their territory. "There have been multiple attacks here," she explained. "We suspect the Eclipsed Order is behind them. They are a radical group that believes our family should not rule. Adrian frowned. Terrorists. In a way, Serenia said, but they have powerful allies within the court. The Lyra leaned forward. That's why we don't trust easily. We don't even know if some of our own guards are loyal. Adrian nodded. This was worse than he thought. So, you're telling me I'm not just protecting you from assassins, he said. I'm also watching out for traitors in your own palace. Serenia gave a small smile. Exactly. Adrian sighed. Great. Sounds fun. The Lyra still looked skeptical but said nothing. Before they could continue, a sharp knock sounded on the door. A Valeri guard entered, his face pale. Your Highnesses, we have a situation, he said urgently. There was an attack. Someone tried to poison your evening meal. Silence filled the room. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. His job had just begun, and already, someone wanted the twins dead. He looked at the sisters. I hope you both understand now. Trust isn't a luxury you have. It's a necessity. The Lyra's expression was unreadable, but for the first time, she didn't argue. Adrian stood outside the royal kitchens, his eyes scanning every corner of the hallway. The smell of food still lingered in the air, thick with spices and herbs. He could hear soft voices from behind the door, but his mind was focused on the warning that had come just moments ago. Someone had tried to poison the sisters' evening meal. Poison. He muttered under his breath. That's not just a threat. It's a statement. The royal kitchens were already under lockdown, with guards stationed at every exit. Adrian had no doubt that they were keeping the twins safe, but what about the rest of the palace? There were far too many people here who wanted them gone. People with power and influence. Inside, the twins sat at a long table, their faces unreadable as they stared at the untouched plates of food. Adrian walked in, his presence quiet but firm. He wasn't just a bodyguard anymore. He was becoming their only true line of defense. Serenia looked at him with a calm but weary expression. We knew it wouldn't be long before someone tried something. Adrian glanced at Valyra, who seemed tense, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. You were expecting this. Valyra's eyes narrowed. I've lived in the shadow of betrayal my entire life. It was only a matter of time before someone got bold enough to try something. Serenia nodded in agreement. And there's more going on in the palace than we realize. The Eclipsed Order is moving, but we think they have help from somewhere closer. Adrian leaned against the table, his mind racing. A traitor, you think? We know it's likely, Serenia replied, but we don't know who. There are many who still resist our rule, especially since our father's passing. Adrian folded his arms. So, the palace is a powder keg just waiting to explode. Valyra scoffed. You don't understand. The nobles, the military leaders, they don't respect us. They never have. And now they want to see us fail. Adrian fought for a moment. It wasn't just a battle for power. It was a fight for survival. You can't keep living like this, Adrian said, his voice firm. You're both sitting on a throne of lies and secrets, and one of those secrets is bound to tear everything apart. Valyra shot him a sharp look, but Serenia spoke before her sister could say anything. What do you suggest? Adrian didn't hesitate. We expose the truth. Every traitor, every person who wants you dead. They're in this palace, and I'll find them. But you have to trust me. Serenia looked at him with a deep, searching gaze. For the first time, she didn't look at him as just a bodyguard. She looked at him as someone who could help save their lives. Valyra, however, wasn't convinced. You think you can protect us from everyone. Even if you know who they are, how can you stop them? Adrian met her eyes, unwavering. I'm not here to stop them. I'm here to make sure they don't win. There was a long silence. Valyra's gaze softened, but she didn't speak. Serenia nodded, as if coming to a decision. We'll do this your way, Serenia said quietly. But know this, human, we'll be watching you closely. Adrian smiled, but it was brief. He knew that this was just the beginning. The real danger hadn't even shown itself yet. The palace buzzed with tension, its walls echoing with rumors and hushed whispers. Adrian could feel the eyes of the nobles on him every time he passed through a corridor. The looks ranged from confusion to outright distrust, but he didn't care. His job was clear: protect the princesses and uncover the enemies lurking within. That evening, the royal family held a grand banquet in honor of a visiting diplomat. The air was thick with excitement, and the palace halls shimmered with lights and laughter. Adrian stood at the back of the hall, his eyes darting from one guest to another. The food had already been inspected, and the guards stood at every entry point. But Adrian knew that the real danger wouldn't come from the outside. It was already inside. The twin princesses entered the hall, their presence drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Serenia moved with grace, her expression calm and composed, while Valera walked with a rebellious confidence that seemed to challenge the very air around her. Adrian could see the way people reacted to them. Some admired them, others feared them, but none truly respected them. The tension between the two princesses and the court was palpable. Adrian's instincts kicked in. He wasn't just guarding them from physical threats. He was protecting them from the silent enemies that surrounded them. He kept his distance, watching the room closely. Then, a sudden shift in the atmosphere caught his attention. One of the nobles, Lord Krivix, approached the princesses. Adrian had been warned about Krivix, a powerful man with far too many ties to the Eclipsed Order. His smooth words and charming smile concealed his true ambitions. Adrian's hand tightened around the hilt of his weapon, his senses heightened. "Your Highnesses," Krivix greeted Serenia and Valera with a bow. "It is an honor to be in your presence this evening." Valera, never one to hide her disdain, simply nodded, her eyes narrowing. "The pleasure is yours, I'm sure." Serenia, always the diplomat, gave him a warmer smile. "Thank you for joining us, Lord Krivix. I hope the journey here was comfortable." Adrian noticed Krivix's gaze flickering toward him, his eyes calculating. He was sizing Adrian up, and it made Adrian's skin crawl. The night progressed, with music filling the air and laughter echoing off the walls. But Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His instincts were telling him that danger was near, but he couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. Suddenly, a commotion erupted. One of the servants dropped a tray of food, and the entire room fell silent. Adrian's hand immediately went to his weapon. His eyes scanned the crowd, every muscle in his body tense. Then it happened. A small vial, barely visible among the food, shattered on the floor near the princesses. The distinct smell of poison quickly filled the air. Adrian's heart raced. "Get down," he shouted, rushing toward the princesses. In an instant, he was at their side, pushing them both behind a nearby pillar. The room erupted into chaos as guards scrambled to identify the source of the poison. But Adrian didn't care about the chaos. He was focused on the princesses, ensuring their safety. Serenia looked at him, her eyes wide with shock. You saved us." Adrian nodded, his voice low but steady. "That's my job." Valera's expression softened for the first time since he'd arrived. She glanced at him with something resembling gratitude. "I didn't think you'd actually be able to stop it." Adrian smiled, though it was brief. "Trust isn't built on words. It's built on actions." Serenia nodded slowly, her gaze shifting from Adrian to the crowd. The evening had ended in confusion, but the real message was clear. Whoever had tried to kill them wasn't finished yet. And neither was Adrian. The night had ended in chaos, but the danger had not passed. Adrian stood alone outside the princess's quarters, his mind racing. The poison attack during the banquet had been an attempt to kill the twins, but the question remained, who was behind it? The guards had locked down the palace, ensuring that no one could leave until the culprit was found. Adrian was certain the traitor was among them. Someone who knew exactly how to strike at the heart of the royal family without being detected. "Adrian." He turned to see Serenia approaching, her calm demeanor hiding the storm of emotions behind her eyes. She was always the composed one, but he knew that beneath that calm exterior, she was just as worried as Valera. "I need to speak with you," she said softly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Adrian nodded and followed her down a narrow hallway, away from the prying eyes of the palace guards. They reached a small, private chamber, one that was rarely used, even by the princesses. Serenia looked around one last time before locking the door behind them. "I think we both know there's more going on here than just a poisoned meal," she began. Adrian crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on her. "I agree. The poison was just a distraction. Someone is playing a much bigger game." Serenia sighed and sat down at a desk, her fingers running through her hair. "I've known for a while that there are factions within the court that want us gone. But this," she shook her head, "this is different. Someone in this palace is working with the Eclipsed Order. I just don't know who." Adrian nodded. He had seen the way the nobles reacted to the sisters, the sneers behind their smiles. Power was a dangerous thing, and not everyone in the empire was ready to accept the twins as rulers. "I need to know everything," Adrian said firmly. "Who's been working with the Eclipsed Order? Who stands to gain from your downfall?" Serenia hesitated for a moment. "I have my suspicions. Lord Krivex is at the top of the list. He's too ambitious, too clever. But it's not just him. There are others who have been quietly undermining us for years." Adrian felt a chill run through him. Krivex had been the one who'd spoken to the princesses at the banquet, and he had seen the way Krivex had looked at him, sizing him up. The nobleman was dangerous, and Adrian had no doubt he was part of the conspiracy. "I'll find out who's behind this," Adrian promised. "But I need your help." Serenia raised an eyebrow. "Help? How can I help you with this?" "I need access to the royal records, any information that could lead me to the traitors. I need to find out who has been contacting the Eclipsed Order." Serenia looked at him for a long moment, and then, surprisingly, she nodded. "I can get you the access, but it won't be easy. The records are heavily guarded, and the palace is crawling with spies. You'll need to be careful." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I'm too careful. I do what's necessary." Serenia studied him for a moment before speaking again. "I trust you, Adrian. But this is dangerous. If you're caught, we won't be able to help you." "I've faced worse," Adrian replied. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep you both safe." She gave him a small, appreciative smile. "Then we're in this together." As Adrian turned to leave, a thought crossed his mind. They weren't just fighting for the throne. They were fighting for their lives. And the real battle had only just begun. The silence in the royal archives was almost suffocating. Adrian carefully made his way through the long rows of ancient records, his eyes scanning the shelves for anything that might lead to the traitors within the palace. He had been granted access to the royal records by Serenia, but even with her permission, he knew the risks of being caught were high. The old stone walls of the archives were cold, and the flickering light from the overhead torches cast long shadows that seemed to follow him. Adrian didn't mind the darkness. He had spent enough time in dangerous situations to know that nothing good ever came without a price. He paused in front of a shelf filled with ancient scrolls, all carefully labeled with the names of nobles, military leaders, and royal decrees. His fingers brushed the edges of the scrolls, and he could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on him. But right now, history didn't matter. Finding the truth did. Adrian pulled down a scroll that seemed to have the right markings on it. It was labeled with the name Lord Krivex, the nobleman who had been a key player in the banquet and had given Adrian an uneasy feeling since the very first time they'd met. Adrian unrolled the scroll, his eyes scanning the text carefully. "What do we have here?" Adrian muttered to himself as his eyes narrowed in suspicion. The document detailed Krivex's financial transactions over the past few months. There were several large, unexplained payments to an unknown entity, payments that could only be connected to the Eclipsed Order, the radical faction trying to tear down the royal family. Adrian's heart began to race. He quickly rolled the scroll back up, tucking it into his jacket to keep it hidden. He had found what he was looking for, but he knew this was just the beginning. Krivex had been too careful to leave more evidence lying around. Adrian had to dig deeper. As he turned to leave the archives, a soft sound stopped him in his tracks. The light flickered, and he saw a figure moving in the shadows at the far end of the room. Adrian froze, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his weapon. A voice whispered in the silence, "You're looking for answers, aren't you, human?" Adrian's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Instead, he stepped slowly toward the figure, his senses alert. The figure stepped into the light, revealing General Ryler, one of the palace's highest-ranking military officers. Adrian had never trusted Ryler. There was something about the man's cold eyes and quiet demeanor that always set Adrian on edge. "General Ryler," Adrian said, his voice steady. "What are you doing here?" Ryler smiled thinly, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous look. "I could ask you the same thing, bodyguard. It seems you've been poking around where you shouldn't be." Adrian didn't flinch. "I'm just doing my job." Ryler stepped closer, his tone turning more serious. "And what exactly do you think you'll find in these records, human? You're digging into things that are far beyond your understanding. The twins' reign is already in danger. If you keep looking, you'll be in danger too." Adrian's gaze hardened. "I don't scare easily." For a moment, the two men stood facing each other, the tension thick between them. Then Ryler took a step back, his smirk returning. "I'm sure you don't, but you're treading dangerous waters. If you continue this little investigation of yours, you'll regret it." Adrian watched him leave, a sinking feeling settling in his stomach. He had just been warned, and yet the warning had come too late. The traitor had already made his move. As Adrian walked out of the archives, his mind raced. General Ryler was involved in this conspiracy, and he was no friend of the princesses. The question now was, how deep did this betrayal go? And how long did they have before the palace was torn apart from within? Adrian stood outside the palace gates, his breath steady but his mind in turmoil. The discovery of General Ryler's involvement had shaken him more than he cared to admit. He had suspected the general, but hearing those threats from his mouth confirmed it. Ryler wasn't just a loyal officer. He was part of the conspiracy trying to tear the royal family apart. The palace had become a dangerous place for Adrian, but he couldn't leave, not when he was so close to uncovering the truth. And the twins, Serenia and Valera, were counting on him. But now he had to act fast. If he was going to protect them, he needed to uncover more. The problem was that he had already been warned, by Ryler, and by others in the palace. The game was changing. Every step he took brought him closer to the heart of the conspiracy, but also to greater risk. Adrian had no choice but to go underground. The palace was crawling with spies, and the court had grown too dangerous. He had to leave the comfort of his official duties as bodyguard and dig deeper on his own. With Serenia's secret help, Adrian had acquired the key to a hidden tunnel that ran beneath the palace grounds. It was old, used only in times of crisis. He had no idea where it led, but right now he didn't care. The cold stone of the tunnel walls closed in around him as Adrian made his way forward. He knew he was taking a huge risk, but it was the only way he could get to the bottom of the treachery without being washed. His hand tightened on the hilt of his weapon, his senses alert to every sound. The path twisted and turned, leading him to a small, hidden room beneath the palace. It was here that Adrian believed he would find something, the missing piece of the puzzle. As he entered the room, his eyes quickly adjusted to the dim light. He spotted a desk in the corner, its surface cluttered with papers, old maps, and strange symbols. Adrian moved toward it, his fingers brushing over the worn surfaces. The documents on the desk appeared to be reports, official-looking, but there were strange annotations in the margins, notes about covert meetings, unknown transactions, and military movements. Adrian grabbed a few of the papers, his heart pounding. This was it, the evidence he needed to expose the traitors. Just as he was about to leave, a voice echoed down the hallway. "You shouldn't be here." Adrian spun around, his hand instinctively going for his weapon. A figure stepped into the room, their silhouette casting a long shadow in the dim light. It was Valera. Her expression was hard, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of concern and something else. "What are you doing down here?" Adrian asked, his voice low. Valera glanced around nervously. "You shouldn't be the one to do this, Adrian. This is dangerous. We've already lost so much." Adrian set the papers down on the desk. "I have to do this. You can't trust anyone in the palace right now. General Ryler, Lord Krivex, they're all part of the plot. If we don't act, they'll destroy everything." Valera's face softened for just a moment. "I know, but if they find out you've been snooping around," her voice trailed off, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Adrian looked at her seriously. "Then we have no time to waste. We need to expose them before it's too late." Valera didn't argue. Instead, she nodded slowly. "I'll help, but you need to be careful. They won't hesitate to kill you if they find out you're getting too close." Adrian smiled, though it was brief. "I survived worse, and I'm not backing down." With that, he turned and handed her the papers. "Get these to Serenia. She's the only one who can make sense of it all. I'll find the rest." Valera hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'll keep you informed. Just don't do anything reckless." Adrian watched her leave, knowing that the path ahead was only going to get more dangerous. But he also knew something else. He wasn't in this alone anymore. Together, they would fight back, and they would win. The palace was quiet for the first time in weeks. The tension in the air had been thick, like a storm waiting to break. But now, after all the chaos and confusion, things were finally starting to fall into place. Adrian had gathered the evidence he needed, and with Valera's help, the truth was slowly coming to light. But the fight was far from over. The palace, still buzzing with whispers, was on edge. No one could be trusted, and the very people they thought they could rely on were the ones plotting in the shadows. Lord Krivex, General Ryler, both of them had been revealed as part of the conspiracy, and now their days were numbered. Adrian stood in the royal chamber, waiting for the twins. He had helped expose the traitors, but there was still one final step to take. Defeating the conspiracy at its heart. He had done his part, but now the princesses had to take control. Serenia entered first, her calm demeanor as composed as ever, though there was a fire in her eyes. She had seen the evidence, understood the depth of the betrayal, and now it was time to act. Adrian nodded at her. "We've uncovered everything we could. Now it's your move." Serenia looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening. "I couldn't have done this without you, Adrian. I owe you more than you'll ever know." Adrian shrugged, trying to remain humble. "I was just doing my job, but I'm glad I could help." Valera walked in next, her usual defiant expression replaced with something more serious. She had always been the harder of the two to trust Adrian, but now there was a respect between them. The bond that had started with distrust had slowly shifted to something deeper, something he hadn't expected. "I never thought I'd say this," Valera said, her voice low but sincere. "But you've earned our trust, Adrian." Adrian looked at her, surprised. "I didn't expect to hear that from you." She smirked, but there was no malice in it. "I know, I've been difficult, but I see now that you care about us. You've proven it time and time again." Adrian felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. The princesses had been cautious, even cold at times, but they were starting to see him for who he truly was. A protector, not just a human bodyguard. Serenia stepped forward. "We need to act quickly. We'll confront Krivex and Ryler. If we don't do this now, they'll strike first. This empire can't wait any longer." Adrian nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been a soldier for most of his life, but nothing felt as important as this moment. Protecting the twins, exposing the traitors, and finally putting an end to the threat against the royal family. This was the mission he had been waiting for. "The people are behind you," Adrian said, his voice steady. "They won't let this go without a fight. But they need to see you strong. They need to see you lead." Valera gave him a determined look. "Then we lead. Together." Serenia and Valera exchanged a glance, both understanding the weight of the decision they had to make. The palace, the nobles, the military, everything would be in turmoil once they made their move. But they had no choice. "The time has come," Serenia said firmly. "We will take back control of our empire." Adrian smiled, a sense of purpose filling him. "I'll be right beside you. Let's finish this." As the sisters turned to leave, preparing for the final confrontation, Adrian felt a deep sense of pride. He had been more than a bodyguard. He had become part of something far bigger than himself, a family. Together, they would fight for the future of the Valeri Empire. And this time, they wouldn't lose. The royal palace was on high alert. The air was thick with tension as the final confrontation between the royal twins and the traitors who had plotted their downfall was set to unfold. Adrian could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The stakes had never been higher, and the fate of the Valeri Empire now rested in their hands. Adrian had spent countless hours in the shadows, uncovering secrets and gathering evidence. Now, it was time for the truth to be exposed. The plan was simple: confront Lord Krivex and General Rylor in front of the court and the nobles who had backed them. Once the evidence was laid out, they would have no choice but to face the consequences. But Adrian knew better than to underestimate the power of those who sought to control the throne. Krivex and Rylor had been careful, building their web of influence slowly, and they wouldn't give up their position easily. This wouldn't be a battle of words. It would be a fight for survival. The three of them, Adrian, Serenia, and Valera, gathered in the royal chamber. The tension in the room was palpable. The sisters were ready to face their enemies, but Adrian could see the weight of the decision in their eyes. This would change everything. They were about to expose the traitors who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, and once they did, there would be no turning back. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked, looking between the two princesses. Serenia nodded, her face calm but her eyes filled with determination. "We have no choice. If we don't do this now, we risk losing everything." Valera, usually the more impulsive of the two, had a rare moment of silence. She stood tall, her eyes hard as she spoke. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Let's end it." Adrian gave them both a firm nod. They would do this together, as one. The trio made their way to the grand hall, where the nobles had gathered for the day's proceedings. As they entered, all eyes turned toward them. The nobles whispered, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. They all knew the tension was high, but none could have predicted what was about to unfold. "Your Highnesses," Lord Krivex said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He had been waiting for this moment, but he had no idea what the princesses had uncovered. Adrian's hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, ready to act at a moment's notice. The moment had come. Serenia stepped forward, her voice steady and authoritative. "Lord Krivex, General Rylor, we know what you've been planning. Your betrayal is no longer a secret. The Eclipsed Order has had you in its grasp for far too long." A murmur ran through the crowd as Krivex's expression faltered, his mask of calm slipping for a moment. He quickly regained his composure, but Adrian could see the fear in his eyes. "Traitors," Valera spat, her voice full of venom. "You've been poisoning this palace from within, and it's time to expose you for what you truly are." Krivex and Rylor exchanged a quick glance, knowing that their time was running out. The game was over, but they weren't going to go down without a fight. "You think you can defeat us?" Rylor's voice boomed. "We control this empire. We control its future. And you." He pointed at Adrian. "You're just a human. You don't belong here. Adrian stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Ryler. I'm here to protect the princesses, and I'm not going anywhere. Serenia held up the evidence, the papers, the reports, the undeniable proof of their treachery. The people will know the truth, she said, her voice carrying through the hall. And with or without you, this empire will move forward. We will not let you destroy everything our father built. The room fell silent as the weight of the words settled over everyone. The nobles, those who had once backed Krivex and Ryler, now found themselves trapped. They had to choose, side with the traitors and risk everything, or stand with the princesses and secure the future of the empire. And as the traitors realized the game was over, they knew there was no escape. The grand hall was silent as the weight of the confrontation hung in the air. Lord Krivex and General Ryler stood before the princesses, their faces filled with fury and disbelief. The evidence they had tried so hard to bury was now in front of everyone, exposed for all to see. Their betrayal was undeniable. Adrian stood beside the sisters, his eyes scanning the room. The nobles, the guards, the courtiers, they all watched the scene unfold with bated breath. No one spoke, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Krivex was the first to break the silence. His voice was low, dripping with venom. You think you've won. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Serenia stepped forward, her eyes hard. It's over, Krivex. Your game is finished. He turned to Ryler, who stood beside him, still defiant. Ryler's gaze flickered nervously between the princesses and the gathered nobles. He knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would catch up with him. What do you think the people will do when they hear the truth? Valeera said, her voice full of disdain. The empire belongs to us, and you're nothing but traitors. Ryler sneered. The people are weak. They'll follow whoever has the power. And you may have exposed us, but you'll never have their loyalty. Serenia's gaze softened for a moment, as if considering his words. Then she shook her head. It's not just about loyalty. It's about trust. We've earned the trust of the people, and you can't take that away. The nobles in the room, once loyal to Krivex and Ryler, began to shift uneasily. Some looked away, others whispered among themselves. The tide was turning. Adrian could see it in their eyes. The truth had a way of doing that, forcing even the most powerful to face their own guilt. Krivex stepped forward, his hand clenched into a fist. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you've only just started a war. Adrian didn't flinch. You've already lost. Serenia raised her hand, silencing the room. Enough. We don't need to listen to any more of your empty threats. She turned to the nobles, her voice strong and clear. I offer you a choice. Stand with us, or stand with them. The future of the empire is in your hands. But know this, our rule will be one of fairness, of justice. We will rebuild, and together we will ensure the prosperity of the Valeri Empire. One by one, the nobles began to bow their heads, showing their allegiance to Serenia and Valeera. The court that had once conspired against them was now their strongest ally. Krivex and Ryler were led away by the guards, their faces a mix of rage and defeat. Their plan had failed, and they would face the consequences of their actions. As the hall began to empty, Adrian turned to the sisters. You did it. Valeera smiled, a genuine smile that Adrian hadn't seen before. We did it, together. Serenia looked at Adrian, her expression softening. You've been more than just a bodyguard, Adrian. You've been a true ally, a friend. We couldn't have done this without you. Adrian nodded, a sense of pride filling him. It was my honor. But you two are the true leaders here. Valeera's gaze turned serious, her eyes meeting Adrian's. We couldn't have done it without you. You've proven that humans can be just as strong as any of us. Serenia smiled. You've earned your place here, Adrian. With us. And in this empire. Adrian felt a warmth in his chest at their words. For the first time since arriving at the palace, he truly felt like he belonged. He wasn't just a human. He was part of something bigger, something important. As the day faded into night, the palace seemed to glow with a new light. The darkness of betrayal had been vanquished, and a new dawn was rising for the Valeri Empire. And Adrian, the human who had once been an outsider, stood proudly with the royal sisters, ready to face whatever challenges the future held.